Hey, welcome back. Today we are in Mark 7 through 9, and so we are launching into the next section in the book of Mark. I'll try to keep these videos kind of short. Today in chapter 7, Jesus confronts the Pharisees about traditions and commandments, and he draws a distinction between the traditions and the commandments of that come from man and the commandments of God, right? So he says it's possible to honor God with your lips in verse number 6. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. What God is after, what Jesus came to provide, is a godliness that goes past the outside, the exterior, and goes down to the core of who you are. So Jesus came to do that, and he confronts the Pharisees not because they kept some rules, or not even because but because they trusted in those. They did two things: they trusted in those rules to make them right with God, which doesn't work, and secondly, they were fake because they thought that keeping those outward commandments is the main thing. And Jesus, in all of his teaching, communicates that God is not just interested that we do as he says, but that we be as he is, that we be holy to the inside, that we want as he wants and love as he loves. And that's a whole different level, isn't it? It's more than just outward, like I look the part and I keep a few rules. It's like I am that kind of person. And Jesus comes not only to require that, but also to provide it. And that's a massive thing that defines that. So he talks about what defiles people, and he says it's what comes out of you that defiles you, not what goes into you. And so he's talking about what comes out of your heart. By the way, some people, I've got some friends who have used this and said, there you go, that's the proof that it doesn't matter whether I use drugs or drink or whatever else. It doesn't really matter because it's not what goes into me that defiles me. It's what comes out of me. And I would say, yeah. And I've observed many times that what happens is that alcohol or drugs, those kind of things, loosen up the inhibitions and let what's inside come out a little more aggressively with fewer social concerns, right? So sometimes it makes it possible for us to see what we really are in those kind of contexts. And so in that kind of context. So there's an incredible story about the Syrophoenician woman's face, one of my favorites. And then in chapter 8, we get another version of the time when Jesus feeds the crowds. This particular one is like 4,000. Another time he fed 5,000. So there's more than one. This is not a disagreement with other gospels. It's another time. In fact, a similar pattern happens. They pick up leftovers afterwards, and there's plenty left over. This time it was 7 baskets, and the other time it was 12 baskets, and this time it was 4,000 people. The other time it was 5,000. Those aren't contradictions; they are just other stories as people collect them. It's the easiest way to look at it. Like, yeah, it's not a contradiction. Then Jesus begins to have the key conversation where he talks about who do you say that I am. And so that same conversation we had in the last one, remember, Mark and Matthew and Luke are all synoptic gospels, which means seeing together. They all see similarly, and so they cover a lot of the same materials. And then Jesus begins to predict his death and resurrection. So Jesus' death and resurrection is not an accident or incidental. It's not even caused by the crowd. It is something Jesus knew was going to happen. He predicted it. He called it in advance. And if you can predict your own death and predict your own resurrection and then accomplish that, that's amazing. And so he does that. Now, he is transfigured. He's transfigured in front of his disciples, and they see for a moment his actual glory in chapter 9. And it's this overwhelming, unbelievable thing. Jesus veils his glory as when he becomes man, but he has glory that would shock and make every single one of us thunderstruck in his presence. And so he does that. And then there's a beautiful story again where he foretells, he heals a boy and then foretells his death and resurrection again. And then there's the conversation about who's the greatest. So that's Mark 7 through 9, and we will see you tomorrow. All right. God bless.